Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kaboon, and I work on the marketing team here at NSF International, focusing on the Dietary Supplements Division. I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar, where our speakers will give an overview of the NSF Dietary Supplements Program. First, I'd like to introduce you to today's speakers. We have Brandy Reinbold. She is an NSF Senior Project Certification Manager. Brandy's educational background is biological sciences. She has held positions within the pharmaceutical industry, nonprofit, and higher education sectors prior to joining NSF International, primarily in quality roles. As Senior Project Manager of Dietary Supplements, Brandy is responsible for facilitating NSF program requirements between manufacturers and brand owners and ensuring policy requirements are met across the program as a whole. Kevin Hall is also a Product Certification Manager here at NSF. His educational background is in supply chain management, and he has held several operational positions within the logistics industry prior to joining NSF International. Kevin has completed ISO 9001 and CGMP courses through accredited training organizations. As a project manager with the Dietary Supplements Group, Kevin is responsible for facilitating all NSF program requirements between manufacturers and brand owners. Just a few details I'd like to mention before we get started today. During the webinar, I will be placing all attendees on mute to prevent from any distractions. If you have any questions or concerns throughout the webinar, please use the chat function and I will get to you as soon as possible. We will also be fielding a Q&A session at the end of the slides, so please use that function to ask any questions that you might have during the webinar. This webinar is also being recorded, so all registrants will receive an email with a link to download the webinar, as well as a PDF of the slides following the event. Thank you again for joining us today and supporting NSF International Dietary Supplements Program. It's greatly appreciated. And go ahead and take it away, guys.
Hey, thank you, Katie. Appreciate that introduction. This is Kevin Hall speaking. I'll be the first presenter here for you guys today. Just welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're calling in from. Very happy you could all join. Some of you may be familiar with NSF. You may be current clients. You may be don't know everything about NSF or our Dietary Supplements Program. We hope we can provide a really good overview and also some really good details about our programs here at NSF. And we're just excited to have the opportunity to talk to you guys about the requirements and the opportunities for us to work together to basically, sell safer supplements. That's why we're here. So with that, I will jump into the slides here. We are going to go through a quick overview. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on who NSF is because I think many of you may know, but we will give a bit of an overview of our capabilities and who we are as a company. We will then talk about sort of the foundation of our program, which is GMP registration. We will also talk about product certification, which is essentially the next step after GMP registration. We'll talk about acceptance criteria that our program looks at to see if products and companies are suitable for admittance into our program. We'll talk about the couple different standards that we here at NSF certify to in the dietary supplements realm. We'll talk about the annual requirements of those standards, opportunities you have after you achieve them, and then finally we'll talk about sort of the upper echelon that some of you may be interested in, which is the NSF 306 Certified for Sports standard that we also offer. So just as by way of background, the reason NSF International exists, we are a global independent public health and safety organization. The reason we've existed since 1944 and will continue to exist is always the protection and improvement of human health. And we do that through a suite of services. So you've got 6 here on the screen that I think exemplify what we do at NSF. The categories there you see, we do write standards to various industries, various product types. We do testing, of course, to both our own standards and outside standards. We have a lot of labs. We'll get to our capabilities from a laboratory standpoint in a moment. We do certifications to products and these standards. We also do certifications by way of auditing, so whether that's food, water, GMP audits for warehouse and distribution, etc. We offer those services worldwide as well. One big item that some folks don't know that we do through a different entity than our dietary supplements program is our consulting services. And we have those in a variety of industries. You'll see there, obviously, our supplements program, our food programs, but also pharmaceutical, medical device, and we'll talk a little bit about a few of our consulting capabilities in a moment. And then, of course, training. So whether that's at a trade show, you may have seen our classes have been offered. We host trainings at our headquarters here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is right outside of Detroit. And we also will come to your site and do sort of custom trainings for your employees and your companies. Where we see NSF is essentially the linchpin between a couple different groups, of course, different industries. You know, NSF is a large company. We do represent a lot of different industries, from food and supplements, which you may be interested in, but also consumer products, water treatment, automotive is a large group of ours, and a couple others there, sustainability as well. We work with regulators. So we have contacts with the FDA. We keep up with their changes on a daily basis, USDA, the EPA, and then certainly all of our local, federal governments, state governments. And thirdly, I think, you know, we sort of bring in the fact that we can reach out to educators. We can reach out and work with consumer advocacy groups. Sometimes we're in the press for those items, and obviously the general public at large. So just to throw some metrics there about NSF International, we are the developer of over 90 national consensus standards, including NSF ANSI 173, which we'll talk about in depth here in a moment. We have, like I said, we have good ties with key associations, government agencies, advocacy groups, etc. We are a Pan-American Health Organization and WHO collaborating center on food safety, water quality, and indoor environment. And folks very often will meet at headquarters here in Ann Arbor at the NSF headquarters to have summits and joint committee meetings. We are essentially, you know, we have access to and we operate in 168 countries. And of that, we have 52 office and lab locations throughout those various countries. So it's a pretty extensive network of capabilities that we can offer worldwide. Just to give you a little bit of information on, you know, our laboratory systems and the folks that run them, we have over 2,100 professionals, both microbiologists, chemists, also toxicologists, engineers, and then the professional folks, the public health experts that also help run the programs that maybe don't work in the labs. But we do have over just under 300,000 square feet of laboratories, and certainly one of our biggest ones is in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is just outside of Detroit. So a lot of testing does occur here at our headquarters. All of our laboratories are ISO 17025 accredited to provide testing, certification, and technical services. And we also have our Applied Research Center, which can provide custom research and development services, sort of bespoke research and development services, if those would be of interest to you. So within NSF International, and where dietary supplements falls inside our company, is the Health Sciences Division. And again, we do a variety of services within the Health Sciences Division, all sort of centrally found around the biotech, supplement, medical device industries. But essentially, what we're here to talk about today, and what the Health Sciences Division has done over the past couple decades, is we've helped to write and we certify to the only accredited American National Standard, and that stands for ANSI if you're not familiar. And the standard is NSF ANSI 173, which it verifies the safety and identity of dietary supplements. So that's really what we're going to jump into here in just a moment. But I also want to point out that we do provide DNA testing of dietary supplements and ingredients, especially botanicals, which can be of a lot of interest to folks these days especially. We have, within the Health Sciences Division, also beverage quality certification, so bottled water, packaged ice, for example, flavored water, to both U.S. and EU regulations. And we also want to point out just the fact that meeting the requirements of any of these standards or guidelines that we talked to you about today, it shows that your brand is committed to a level of quality and transparency that it not only proves that all the hard work you guys have done on your quality systems and on your products that's good to have, but you guys were willing to open up the doors and willing to open up your products to us as a third party, an independent third party. So it really sends a message to your clients. It sends a message to your consumers. Your entire supply chain will be able to see that you've done that once you either achieve NSF GMP registration, or if you're interested in one of the product certifications for your own products or that get made at a contract manufacturer. So let's go ahead and jump into the various standards that we do offer and the requirements around them. So all of our standards, these three that you see on the screen here, are accredited. So we have NSF ANSI 173 for dietary supplements. Generally, those are products that have the supplement facts panels. We have NSF 229, which is a guideline to functional foods. It's very similar to NSF ANSI 173, but that's more aimed at nutrition facts products. And then, of course, like I mentioned, we have on top of those two, which are prerequisites for it, we have NSF 306, which is our Certified for Sport standard. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in depth, but that's a standard that is essentially screening for, on top of what 173 and 229 are looking for, that's screening for banned substances in the sports world. So a lot of you may be interested in that as well. Talking about our GMP registration, those three standards that I just mentioned, the GMP registration is essentially the foundation of those three standards. To be admitted into one of those programs, you do have to have NSF GMP registration. The process it's exactly what you'd think. I'll go through here the steps of it. But you've got your quote, and our business development managers are very good about walking through what exactly the GMP process will look like, what the correct standard for you to get, whether it's a warehouse or distribution standard, whether it's a packaging standard or a manufacturing standard. They'll walk you through that. They'll help you fill out an application, so we're gathering your facility information. We're understanding exactly the scope of the services that you as a company offer. Once we get that paperwork out of the way, we're able to do what we call a PAC review. It stands for Program Acceptance Criteria. And we'll go into exactly what that is because we become very transparent about that, and it's an important step. So we will talk about that, but it's essentially, are you meeting certain requirements to be allowed into our program? And again, it sort of revolves around going back to our mission. Do the companies that we work with, do the products that we work with, do they benefit or add to human health and safety in some way? And we'll get into those requirements. There's obviously a scheduling piece. We work with your teams to identify a good time to do the audit up front. After the audit occurs, we have a requirement for CAPA's, corrective action and preventive action plans, for any nonconformances that are identified during the audit. And then we do have ongoing annual requirements, and we'll talk about those in a moment. So for our GMP registration, like I mentioned, each of those standards, NSF ANSI 173, NSF 229, and NSF 306 Cert for Sport do require that the facility that those products are being manufactured or packaged in is NSF GMP registered. Now, these audits are to the FDA's Code of Federal Regulations. It's Part 111 in Chapter 21. And we also have industry-leading best practices that we've included in our guidelines that we send out for those audits. So by doing that, it helps ensure that not only the exact product and exact lot that we tested meets label claims and contaminant limits, but it helps ensure that all products that are manufactured at your facility are following the same processes, are going through the same quality checks. So it's a really great addition to getting your product certified. Is just the sense that NSF will also be there in your facilities to see that those products are going through the same sorts of processes. We of course we have certificates once you achieve the GMP registration that you can share with your clients and your folks. Our auditors I'd say since they're out in the field, they're working face to face with folks at these facilities. They are we rely on them very heavily, and because of that, we only hire the best auditors. We have essentially folks that come from the industry. These are not people that are fresh out of college, nothing wrong with that, but they just don't have the expertise and the experience that you need to come out, understand a facility's operations and go through and do an audit there. And our auditors every year are always calibrated. We always do trainings to make sure that each auditor you get, no matter who it is, if it changes 1 year to the next, is going to deliver the same level of service to you using the same requirements, all trained and agreed upon each year. So that's good to know, and that's good to have. We also have auditors that speak a variety of languages. That's how we're able to deliver audits in other countries. So we do have bilingual auditors. We have translation services if they're needed if we don't have that specific capability, but we have a pretty good network of auditors. Like I said, the audits, there are annual requirements. So after your first audit, 6 months later, you'll have what we call a monitoring audit. So it's about 6 months apart, so there's 2 audits a year. And what this does is, like as I was pointing out, you're opening up your doors to have a third party come in and audit to basically the FDA's requirements and a few of our own requirements. And what it's doing is it's giving you a level of risk protection. So, of course the audit's a snapshot in time, but it's also giving you a level of confidence, where the FDA to come knocking, you're prepared, you understand what they're going to ask, and you've actually gone above and beyond by getting NSF registered what the FDA might require. So, nothing's 100% in this world, but it's a really good indicator that you'd be prepared for that. Like I mentioned, we do require corrective actions and preventive action plans. I'll talk about that in a moment because that's usually of good interest. And we do offer the NSF GMP mark if you become registered. So essentially, you can use that in your advertising. You can't put it on every product that you make just because you have GMP registration. There is a separate product mark, but it's very helpful when you're developing your own advertising materials and trying to gain new clients to show that you've gone through a third-party audit. So the different types of GMP registrations we offer, we cover, and I think the breadth of them. We have manufacturing, of course, packaging, and then we have a warehouse and distribution audit, all with slightly different criteria based on the regulations and our requirements. And what our auditors are looking at when they come to your facility, like I said, there's 2 audits a year. The first one, the annual audit, is a 3-day audit, and the follow-up audit, this monitoring audit that I mentioned, is a 1-day audit. And what they're looking at while they're on site is a lot of the headers from those regulations, but essentially you've got personnel. So they're checking that you have trained folks working in your facilities. They're checking that you have qualified employees, those types of things. They're actually walking the physical plant, walking the grounds to make sure that they're maintained. For example, to make sure that there's not any obvious areas that pest harborage could occur. So they are doing that. They're checking, equipment, utensils used, that you have cleaning procedures for those, sanitization procedures, that your equipment's calibrated. That's a very common item that they're looking at. They look at production and process control systems, make sure all of your operations there are following established procedures. They check out holding and distribution areas in your facility. So, for example, they're making sure that you don't have wooden pallets that aren't heat treated. That's a big one. They're making sure that, where you're storing your product is a certain safe amount above the ground, things like that products can't be accessed inappropriately. They're checking into the return of products. So, where do you quarantine returned product? How long does it sit there, and what does the investigation look like into that? They're checking into any product complaints that you may have and that you have records of. So maybe what are your procedures for investigation of product complaints? How do you handle a report on adverse events that may come out of those product complaints? They're looking at records, all sorts of records that you're keeping each day and that your folks are signing off on. So might be batch records, might be the methods of backup of those records. So they're going to look at all of that. And they're also going to look into recall procedures. So, for example, one of the requirements that we have is that a mock recall for a certain product is performed while the auditor is actually on site within a time period there. So after the audit occurs, and again, there's 2 of them a year, the annual audit and the monitoring audit, and after those occur, we have a portal, an online portal called NSF Connect, which is where we ask all of our clients to basically upload all of their responses to nonconformances identified during those audits. And it's a good portal. It's very intuitive. It's easy to use. You can also, do some ancillary items like pay invoices through there. But really, let's talk about the CAPA process because I think a lot of folks are interested in that and the requirements there. We do ask that each of these nonconformances has a root cause analysis done about it. So that's asking why, the 5 whys that folks talk about, really figuring out why did that issue occur. We talk about the corrective action and preventive action process. So obviously the corrective action, how was that issue corrected right now? And then preventive actions, what is your plan to have that be prevented from happening in a similar scenario in the future? And what this does is it makes an environment of continuous improvement. So if some of you are familiar with the ISO 9001 certifications or the food safety certifications such as SQF or BRC, they all follow this sort of plan, do, check, act cycle of continuous improvement. And the corrective action process that is also reviewed by NSF is a huge part of that. It's an absolutely huge part to maintaining and ensuring that that's occurring at your facilities. You're already doing that work, so this is sort of a checksum on the work that you've done to keep your continuous improvement going. And all of that is supported by documentation. So we are reasonable. We understand that some of those nonconformances may be related to things that you can't solve today, you can't solve tomorrow, maybe you can't even solve it this month. But through the idea of supporting documentation, you can have a plan and you can support that plan through documentation. So let me give you an example. Since we do require that these corrective actions are done within 30 days, or at least a plan is submitted within 30 days, it might be that you need to add a pallet rack because you're running out of space. And we understand that the pallet rack may not be installed next week, and so you can't necessarily have that. But photos, purchase orders, those types of things are basically requested to just show that you have the plan. And then, like I said, when the annual monitoring audit comes up, the auditor has a chance to just check and verify that as well. So that's what we mean by the CAPA process that we go through. I believe we have a poll here that you can answer right now. It should be on your screen. Are your GMPs currently audited by a third party? So not necessarily NSF, but do you invite a third party in to audit your GMPs? So I'll give the folks on the line a minute to answer if you'd like. You can skip to the results if you'd like as well. And essentially a lot of yeses. So, that's really good to see. A couple no's, so perhaps there's opportunity there where NSF could be that group that audits you. Or you're also, just doing some information gathering, looking for other groups to potentially audit your GMPs, and that's great. So good information on this poll here. Looks like we had about 30 people respond, so it's a good subsection of the folks on the line. So with that foundation that I've laid of the GMP requirements and of who we are as NSF, I want to hand it over actually to Brandy Reinbold, who's going to talk to you about the requirements for product certification. Brandy is one of my colleagues here and is easily one of our smartest project managers and really knows her stuff. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Brandy.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, as Kevin already discussed, product certification has GMP registration as a prerequisite. This means either you own it yourself or you've contracted your product manufacturing with a company that does. So starting from there, we can assuming that you have GMP registration covered, when you are ready to certify a product with NSF, our sales personnel will provide you a quote, and it is based upon your product labels. Along with that will be included an application, program acceptance criteria review. All of this happens kind of together, followed by a documentation review by our trained toxicologists, testing at NSF, and then ongoing annual requirements similar to our GMP registration program. All NSF certification and registrations are ongoing rolling programs. We'll go into depth into each of these steps at this time. So firstly, I know that we briefly mentioned this earlier, that we do have an acceptance criteria review based upon NSF policies that were updated in November of 2017. Any current client would have received those policy update notifications. This review is the practical application of those policies. And the reason why this exists is because Health Sciences at NSF is a not-for-profit organization with a mission to protect and promote public health, and any business decisions that our group and the dietary supplement certification realm makes have to be in alignment with that mission. With that in mind, all new applications are reviewed for compliance to NSF policies. For example, the USADA Supplement 411 list, which is a list of supplements that have been found to have banned substances in them, whether legal or illegal. Essentially, if your company has products on that list, I mean, that could be a disqualifier to work with NSF. If you have a product on that list, we would encourage you to reach out to USADA and work with them to remove it. Is your company registered with the FDA? This is a legal requirement for a dietary supplement company. Do you have unresolved legal regulatory action, including FDA warning letters? It's not a disqualifier to have received a warning letter, but it is a requirement to have satisfactory resolution. And then finally, a legally compliant website. Obviously, the supplement industry, it has fairly notorious for the claims that supplements make. There are restrictions on what you can say about a dietary supplement. Health claims, for example, and NSF does review the website of all applicant companies upon application and yearly thereafter. There are a number of issues that are commonly found during these reviews. The number one issue is going to be health claims or suggested disease prevention or treatment uses for supplements, and that includes linked references, customer testimonials, social media. Essentially, NSF policies and assessments rely on the FDA opinion where this is available, and if any web content that your company chooses to link to is considered to be your responsibility. In addition to these legal and regulatory compliance aspects of the review, NSF will review your corporate branding to ensure that your company is a good fit for NSF and aligns with the NSF mission to protect public health. NSF policies are broadly define types of products NSF Dietary Supplements does not certify. And in addition to that, if your company primarily deals in those types of products, NSF could decline to work with you. And among those are primarily thermogenic type products, hangover remedies, sexual health products, and cannabinoids, which have a legal gray area as far as whether or not they're allowed. NSF chooses at this time not to work with those types of products. So if you want to know more about those types of restrictions, I encourage you to reach out. We'll provide contact information at the end of this presentation to obtain more information on current NSF policies in that regard. So after assuming you're quoted and you sign your contract and you proceed through the advisory committee review, you'll be assigned a dedicated project manager. Every single customer that NSF has a dedicated project manager who will walk you through every step of the process and will stay with you from year to year. To certify a product, NSF requires detailed information to perform a full audit of the formula before we proceed to testing. because NSF does not want to test your product unless we're sure that it should pass. With that in mind, you'll be provided with a product information form, which is an NSF document that provides all relevant product information, category, how many package sizes do you have, what country of sale, what are its uses, and this helps us categorize it for listings. Included in that form is a formulation embedded spreadsheet. The formula that we collect should be gross inputs, not what you expect to theoretically achieve your label claim. And we ask for all approved suppliers, part numbers, and then either a raw material specification for each of those part numbers or a CVA, one for each part number, for every raw material in your formula. And then finally, we need a label for every single package size, flavor, country of sale that you have. We can perform the review without a marked label. Obviously, many companies will not have a marked label upon initial application, but it is a requirement that your product be marked at the time of listing. Any production after your listing is final should bear the NSF mark. Once all of your documents have been collected by your project manager, they will be submitted to NSF Toxicology for review by trained toxicologists. There's a 5 business day turnaround for this review. Toxicology will perform an in-depth review and audit of your formula, make sure that you are meeting all of your target claims. All of your raw materials have either an NDI or are GRAS, that you don't exceed upper safety limits for any analytes. It's a very in-depth review to verify the identity and safety of your product. There could be some back and forth at this stage if toxicology has any questions, especially if you have toxicology will generate a registered formula, which until testing passes is considered unauthorized. That will be released to you at the time the review is complete. After testing passes, this will be released as an authorized formula, and that affirms that your product shall bear the NSF mark and is approved. So this next slide is just a little bit in depth of what this tax review does cover. It says Phase 3 checklist for a program advisory committee. That is essentially, they'll confirm the initial review that was performed upon application, that your product does meet all standard requirements. As is the case for GMP registration, NSF does have some additional product requirements that may not necessarily be strictly legal requirements, but they are a requirement of our certification standard, such as the caffeine warning above a certain level. There are certain claims that might require special labeling based upon the requirements of NSF ANSI 173 and NSF 229. As I mentioned earlier, there is a full audit of the formula and all claims that are made. Your formula must add up to at least 100% of your claim for dietary supplements, which is a legal requirement. Overages are permitted and they should be included in your formula. And that formula should include not only your dietary ingredients, but all excipients. Any material that goes into your product you want to be included. It should equal 100% of the weight of your either your tablet or your capsule. Toxicology will set up testing based upon the formula that is provided and assess whether or not you have essentially identical formulas that can be bracketed, which can save you money Essentially, if you have, for instance, a protein that has 3 flavors, chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry, it is very possible that NSF could certify all 3 flavors by just one test per year for that family. It is only decided upon after review to confirm the similarity of the formulas, but it is an option that is available, and toxicology does assess that during the review. At the time the toxicology review is complete, a shipping form will be released to you. This will come from your project manager. It has all of the information you need to submit sample to the NSF laboratories, ISO accredited as previously mentioned. The sample comes from you. It should be in finished product packaging, and NSF ANSI 173 and 229 are both all lot certification, which means one annual test is enough to certify all lots that you produce of that product throughout the year. NSF has what we call a targeted verification, meaning that over a 3-year period, all claims are tested on a rotating basis, and this is at the discretion of NSF Toxicology. With that said, there are certain things that are tested every year, and those include if you have botanical ingredients in your product, pesticides, micro-testing, aflatoxins, heavy metals are all tested every time. Additionally, if your product is a protein or has caffeine, these are tested every year. If your product has a fish oil, we would include PCB dioxins testing. It's essentially based upon the identity of your product. It is important that once your product is certified by NSF, that if you make any changes, and that includes not only to input amounts, but to suppliers, part numbers, that NSF be notified each time. The formulas should be kept up to date. They are audited annually, which is one reason why the GMP registration component is so important. During the GMP audit once per year, the actual manufacturing of the certified products will be specifically targeted for audit to confirm that the products being produced and released into the market is in fact what NSF has certified. And additionally, it is audit that all of the GMPs are being followed, and that it is in fact a valid certification. All of the changes that you make should go right to your certification project manager. Testing may or may not be required. It depends upon the changes that are made. For instance, if you were to just change a supplier but not the part itself of a raw material, it is possible that no testing would be required. However, if you were to change a raw material spec, maybe you change to a different concentration or purity of a raw ingredient, it's possible that would require testing. Only toxicology can confirm whether or not testing is required if you make revisions to a certified formula. And on top of that, an annual test is also required. It is possible to forego testing for a calendar year, but the only valid reason to do so is non-production. If you don't produce a certified product over a 2-year period, that product is subject to delisting, but as long as you produce once every other year, the listing remains active. In addition to all of these product certification requirements, NSF is launching a new option. If you are a manufacturer who owns a private label supplement line that you sell to your customers, if you were to certify that private label line following the process that we just went over, there is a new option available. There's two ways to do it. We call it another name for or a shared listing and owned listing. Essentially, if you certify your private label product formula, you can potentially use the NSF mark on all of your customers' production runs. Either of these requirements options have similar requirements. We do need to quote you, review the labels for your customers' products, make sure they share the same supplement facts panel with your existing certified product, and that the claims are in line with what is approved for your product. And then essentially we will just add that as an alternate trade name for your product, and we can share your listing with your clients and potentially list thousands of products underneath your certification, or we can copy your listing, and if your customer wants to own their own listing and they don't want to have their products listed under your public listing, we can actually copy your certification for them for a small annual fee as well. The only thing to be aware of if this is your situation, that it is a requirement that any brand that uses the NSF mark does go through the acceptability criteria review. So if you're interested in that option, I would suggest that you visit NSF booth 5071 at Supply Side West, because we'll be formally launching this option at that show, and there'll be marketing material and a lot more information available to you there, and the people there would be happy to talk to you in depth about that. Alternately, if you have any questions, we'll provide you with an email address at the end of the presentation that you can contact. Looks like we have another poll. So, does your company currently have products tested by a third-party certifier? Looks like most of the people that we have on the line do already have products certified by NSF. Hopefully we're providing you some new information or clarifying some of the NSF's requirements if NSF is not your certifier. So I'm going to close the poll. For those of you who do not have a third-party certifier for your products, hopefully the information that we've provided is helpful to you. If not, like I said, we're going to provide contact information at the end of this presentation where you can learn more. In addition to our product certification and our GMP registration, we have another certification, NSF Certified for Sport. NSF Certified for Sport is also kind of considered an add-on program, and that's because the prerequisite to NSF Certified for Sport is product certification. It can be NSF ANSI 173 or NSF 229 for functional foods. And in addition to that, your product must be made at an NSF GMP registered facility. This means that NSF Certified for Sport is by far the most comprehensive sport certification that there is. NSF screens for over 270 banned substances, substances that are prohibited by organizations such as WADA, MLB, and NFL. This list is updated all the time. We have industry-leading scientists working year-round on developing new methods and identifying new substances of concern to include in our list. This is a lot-by-lot certification most of the time, and it's eligible as an add-on. You can either certify one of your lots or all of them. Listings are published at nsf.org or nsfsport.com. All sport certifications follow chain of custody, which means that they come in, they're required to be submitted in finished product packaging, lot numbers marked, and their handling is controlled through all steps of the process at NSF to ensure that the identity is protected and the results are 100% valid. In addition to this certification, NSF launched a new Certified for Sport app in 2017, which is being updated regularly. I encourage you to download it if you haven't already. It contains a ton of easily accessible Certified for Sport lots, and improvements are continuing to be made. It's very user-friendly, and I think that you'll find that it's a really good source of information and an easy way to purchase Certified for Sport products. So in addition to all of these NSF certifications, there comes benefits. To maximize your certification, you can talk to the NSF marketing team. It opens the doors to engage with professional sports leagues and coaches and dietitians. We're providing you with a list of events that are up and coming that are open to you if you have a Certified for Sport product. In many cases, NSF will be there and would love to hear from you if you have a certified product, or if you don't and you would like to hear more. As far as attending any of these events, they are run by the organizations themselves, and you should contact them directly if you are interested in attending. In addition to the access that you get when you have NSF Certified for Sport, there are a number of co-marketing tools available created by NSF that are available to you, which include NSF marks and a number of approved uses for those marks, including your marketing material, your product itself, and we have messaging and copy points to help you articulate and explain the benefits of your certification, what it means about the quality of your product to your customers. NSF is really good at talking about NSF and really understands how to talk about these certifications. And if you need training for your sales team to talk about this, if you think that they need help, we do have dedicated marketing staff that can help you with that. Additionally, we have press release templates for both GMP and Certified for Sport. Infographics, short animated videos are coming soon, and then the online listings, which are updated daily. So that's all we have today. We're going to move on to some questions. If there's anything that you have questions about that you don't want to submit through this forum, I encourage you to contact our team at supplements@nsf.org, or alternately visit the group that will be at SupplySide West in a couple of weeks, booth 5071. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Katie for questions.
So we had a couple questions come in, so I will read them off and you guys can answer them as best you can. We have one that came in that says, do you offer certification for CGMP and CF111?
So I mean, that sounds to me like they're asking about GMP registration and 111. I guess we do. That is NSF's GMP registration for dietary supplements. But the important thing to note is that the certification is to NSF ANSI 173, which is a standard. So while it does encompass 111 and it can be taken to mean compliance with 111, it is also a registration to industry best practice, so it is above and beyond 111.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Another question that came in is, could you please clarify the test requirements for botanical ingredients and the frequency of these tests?
Do you say botanical ingredients?
Correct.
Botanical ingredients, NSF has actually developed a proprietary pesticide screen. It's actually been published recently, this spring. NSF has researched specifically pesticide residues in dietary supplement products and has basically been an industry leader in developing a set of acceptability limits specific to dietary supplements, I believe the only in existence. It's a very thorough, a very extensive screen. The full list of pesticides covered in that screen is in the certification standard. And any product that has a botanical in it above a certain level, like 2%, above 2% will have a pesticide screen yearly. In addition to that pesticide screen, we will do identity testing of that botanical to ensure that it is indeed the botanical that is claimed in the formula and the label. So there's two aspects to testing for botanicals. Obviously, we mentioned earlier as well the DNA testing that is available. That is not normally a part of certification services. That's a contract testing service available through Authen Technologies and the ARC. But we do DNA authentication of botanical ingredients as well. And we can certify raw materials of botanical nature.
Thank you very much, Brandy. Another question came in is, what is the difference between the two types of audits, monitoring and annual GMP? And do the auditors audit the facility any differently?
Sure. So that's a good question. The biggest difference between the annual and the monitoring certainly is going to be the amount of time that the auditor is there. So for our annuals, it's a more extensive audit. It's on average about a 3-day audit. And the monitoring audit about 6 months later is only a 1-day audit on average. They're not necessarily auditing any differently. They're still going to be on site looking at your facility, looking at a lot of the same things. But of note, what they do during that 1-day monitoring audit is oftentimes a more robust check of the corrective actions that you've implemented over the past 6 months or year, and making sure that those are not only still in place but also still effective. So there's a bit more of a focus on that, but it's still going to be relatively the same requirements that you see in each audit.
Thank you, Kevin. We have a couple more questions that came in. Does the registration for ANSI 173 cover GMP for cosmetics as well?
That registration does not, unfortunately, cover cosmetics.
We do have a cosmetics audit, though.
There is a cosmetics audit. It's through a different group here at NSF. I'm not too familiar with it. There is a standard for it, and we do audit to it. We could certainly point you in the right direction if you contacted us, though, at the supplements@nsf.org. So while our group doesn't handle that, and it's not the NSF 173 standard, there is a standard we could get you more information on if you just let us know.
Thank you, Kevin. I have a question that came in that says, does NSF offer consulting services for new product development?
We absolutely do offer consulting services. We have a couple different groups here that could that could provide that. Our group specifically, the group that's doing the certifications and the registrations, does not do the consulting, so that there's a firewall between the two groups and that we're not auditing our own work, essentially. But we do have groups here in-house that can provide consulting. So we mentioned the Applied Research Center. They can help do consulting on product development. And we also have the training and consulting teams that can provide consulting on sort of the broader requirements if you don't need as much scientific assistance there. Again, to get a hold of either of those groups, it's that same central location. We could put you in touch very quickly with them, supplements@nsf.org.
One of the questions that came in says, is there an upper limit for NSF product verification label claims?
To answer that, so NSF does have adhere to upper tolerable intake limits for if they exist. I mean, for instance, if you have an NDI for an ingredient, generally that NDI, it covers a use to a certain level. We would hold a certified product to that. Additionally, a lot of other, vitamins and minerals have generally recognized upper tolerable intakes, and that is assessed, and certified products must be at or under those levels. So it is a part of the certification.
Thank you, Brandy. I have a question that came in that says, does your GMP CFR 111 training course at Supply Side West certify the persons participating? Basically, they're asking, does this certification qualify the person for performing audits at their own facility?
So the GMP course that we're offering at Supply Side West is it's a CGMP course. It's a 2-day course. It doesn't certify that person officially. I mean, there is record that that person has taken that training. However, there's going to be a more required for an individual. If I go to that class for 2 days, I could take in everything, but I still wouldn't quite be a qualified professional to run your quality program at your manufacturing facility. So it's an excellent piece to have in addition to, experience, other education that individual may have, but it's not all inclusive. One visit to that class wouldn't make you an expert, but it's certainly part of it.
I would like to add to that annual GMP refreshers are a requirement for industry, and this class does satisfy that requirement. And NSF does do group trainings for this course on site for your company. If you were to have this class performed at your site for your entire staff, it would satisfy your annual GMP refresher requirement. I do want to say that I do believe we do have an auditing course separate from GMP that runs periodically. Maybe not at supply side, but I think that might be more appropriate if you're looking for audit training specifically.
I have a question that came in that says, what does the NSF 229 cover?
NSF 229 is functional foods. I believe that we're now including medical foods in the scope of 229, which essentially they can be very similar to a dietary supplement. It could be maybe nutrition bars. With some proteins, you could kind of go either way as to whether it's a dietary supplement or a functional food. Essentially, we consider it a food if the intent is a meal replacement. If the product has a nutrition facts panel, is intended to be a meal replacement or a beverage, then it would be covered under the scope of NSF 229. The requirements are very similar to 173. It's more just a slightly different scope of product.
Thank you, Brandy. One more question. If we have a co-packer without any of our, if we as a co-packer without any of our own products, how would we benefit from the GMP certification if we already are SQF certified?
Yeah, so if you're already SQF certified, you're already being audited by some certification body to the SQF food safety standard. The biggest benefit and the biggest reason you would want to become GMP registered with NSF is if you have folks that are using your facility as a co-packaging facility that want their products to be NSF certified. So that would be the biggest benefit there. The SQF audit is covering different requirements, different aspects than the GMP audit does. There's going to be some crossover, but for example, there's things in SQF that are strictly related to like HACCP and food that the GMP audit doesn't explicitly require. But again, if you're looking to have products come through your facility that need to be NSF certified, you'd have to be NSF GMP registered as well. We as NSF offer SQF audits So it's definitely possible that you could have those visits sort of very close to each other and less disruptive to your group.
Thank you, Kevin. I do have one more question that came in, and then we'll wrap and we'll follow up with any other questions that came in directly with those who asked them. This question is for you guys, and I'm not sure it actually has to do with auditing and the process. It says, what does the process include for auditing a lab? So that might be something we have to follow up with them directly on if we need to talk to an auditor, but thought maybe I'd give you guys a shot at answering.
I mean, I can take a stab at it. So the GMP audit and GMPs in general obviously do include any laboratory operations that you have at your facility. I mean, I can think of a number of aspects of supplement GMPs that would be very specifically applicable to your laboratory, and that includes good documentation practices, version control of your SOPs and forms, make sure you're always performing the most current version of your assay, that all of your staff are trained and that they're trained on the most current version of your SOPs, that you're calibrating your instruments, and that you're that you're following those SOPs exactly as they are written every time. And that you have the appropriate quality controls in place. So, very specifically, NSF doesn't require that you do anything a specific way, but all of your systems have to comply with the good manufacturing practices, and that is no different in a lab than it is from your manufacturing operations. They're all GMP areas, and would have to have the similar controls in place, segregation of samples and, labeling of your reagents and cleaning solutions. I mean, the lab is going to be subject to the same type of audit criteria. We do have guidance that helps you if you are subject to NSF GMP audits, that you can review in advance of your audit. It will give you a lot more detail on the line items that will be checked, but essentially it is similar requirements to the rest of your manufacturing and production areas.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Brandy and Kevin, for all the questions you guys answered and for delivering a really great webinar today to everyone. I did want to thank everyone again for joining in on the webinar. You will receive within the next week an email that has a link to the recording of the webinar as well as a PDF of slides. So thank you very much, and you will be receiving a survey about today's webinar as well, and we'd appreciate any feedback you have and some recommendations on topics to webinars in the future. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.